Hello, everybody. We're going to give it just another minute or two, and then we'll just get started right at 11, which is a little bit different than we do with most of the webinars. We usually give a little bit of extra time, but we're gonna shoot to get it started right on time this year, or this particular presentation. All right, so you already heard from me. So I'm Réal Bouchard, CEO with BayWa Canada. Matthew Lanigan is out this week, and so he wasn't able to join us, but I'm happy to jump in. You all know this about us, but continuing education is important over here at BayWa, so we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to join us, and Fortress Power for a discussion about their new commercial and industrial battery storage product. So just a reminder that this presentation will be recorded and it'll be shared on our YouTube channel as well as sent out in our monthly newsletter. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll find all of our webinars on there moving forward. So while we have, before I introduce our presenter, I'll just let you know a few administrative and housekeeping tasks. So we're going to keep all of the questions to the end, but feel free to use the chat function to pose your questions, just so you don't forget it, or write it down on your own, however you like. But Kyle will be addressing those right at the end. Just goes with the flow a little bit better. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kyle from Fortress Power. So Kyle is a mechanical engineer background, been with Fortress Power for about 8 months. Says he's been drinking from the fire hose, which is great. It's a great analogy. Always like that one. And we're happy to have him here teach us all about Fortress Power's new product that just came out this year. So I'll hand over the microphone to Kyle, and yeah, we'll look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, Kyle.
Awesome. Thanks, Réal. Thank you, BayWa. I really appreciate everyone taking the time today to listen to our spiel, give you just the heads up on where we stand at Fortress Power for the commercial and industrial space. If you're familiar with Fortress Power, we really cut our teeth in the residential market, but it's really exciting this year. We're branching out into the C&I space. So without further ado, I will just jump right in. Let me see here. All right. So those of you that aren't familiar with Fortress Power, we are a US headquartered company. We manufacture LFP, or lithium iron phosphate batteries, for residential and now commercial applications. Our headquarters is just north of Philadelphia in Southampton, PA. In fact, you can see a picture on the right-hand side there of our facility. This is our last week in this facility. We've really grown since we were founded in 2017. So we've been in this spot for the last 5 years, but it's moving week. We're moving into our new facility a little bit closer to Langhorne, Pennsylvania, if you're familiar with that. But you can see on the right-hand side there the pictures of the solar panels on our roof. We really pride ourselves in being able to see and understand how the batteries are performing. So we have a whole bank of residential batteries and inverters in our facility that we can test and troubleshoot alongside those in the field. So as we move into this new facility, we're going to be expanding that test lab to include 480 volt commercial applications, which is really exciting. But like back to Fortress Power, founded in 2017, we're owned by a group of private equity investors, minority ownership, and solar veterans who combined experience. You're talking decades and decades of solar and storage experience coming out of Fortress. As you can see, we have 4 warehouse facilities, one in Pennsylvania, one in Florida, one in California, and one in Texas. So makes getting stock around the country very simple for the end user and installers. We do have installs all over the United States, Canada, Central Caribbean. In Puerto Rico, they really love Fortress batteries because of its durability and our responsiveness on the engineering side. But South America, Europe, Middle East, really all over the world, Fortress has done one project or another. But probably our biggest projects that we've done to date was one was our first project, which was for Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority, or SEPTA. They run the train system in and out of Philadelphia. We also have done a job for Hydro-Quebec up in Montreal, and the Navajo Reservation out in, I believe, Arizona, with a completely off-grid system. So even though we are a relatively young company, we've kind of seen it all. Really, our first job was that commercial job for SEPTA for their switchgate gear. But as I said, we've cut our teeth on the residential side, and now we're really branching out into that commercial market. But really, we serve all sorts of customers, all sorts of different markets. You see there, residential, commercial. On the RV side, you think of people who you'd call preppers, people who are trying to prepare for anything that could happen. They really seem to love Fortress Power products, again, because of that durability and responsiveness. But then you look at marine, telecom, and railway, some of the more remote applications that we're able to service as well. So an exciting time for Fortress, exciting time to get to know this new commercial product that we're offering. Just briefly, I want to touch on why customers really are gravitating towards lithium iron phosphate, or LFP batteries, compared to nickel manganese cobalt NMC batteries like you'd find in a Tesla Powerwall, or other types of lithium ion or lead acid, flooded lead acid batteries. First and foremost, the reason why people choose LFP batteries is safety. Compared to an NMC battery, nickel manganese cobalt battery, they don't experience what's called thermal runaway nearly as easily as some other types of batteries do. Now, thermal runaway is simply the process of a single cell in the battery getting so warm to the point that it combusts, and it's a chain reaction, right? So one cell gets really hot, it combusts, it heats up the cell next to it, it combusts, and it's just a cascading effect to the point you have to wait until that fuel is exhausted to put that fire out. For example, if a Tesla NMC, a car that uses NMC batteries catches fire in your house, there's a good chance that the firefighters are going to let your house burn down, because there's no really good way to put that battery out except for letting the fuel run out. So, like I said, first and foremost, the reason why people choose LFP technology, LFP chemistry for batteries is it's much safer. It doesn't experience that thermal runaway at as low of temperatures as NMCs do, and doesn't experience it to the effect that NMCs do or other lithium ions. You can see on the second point there on the slide, cycle life at 80% depth of discharge. You're going to get just more cycles out of this battery than you would really any other type of chemistry. You're able to, the ability to put more power through the battery over its life cycle, you're directly attacking that return on investment. So you can see in off-grid years there, you're getting just more time that the battery is in operation, and that's directly attacking your bottom line, which speaks to the energy throughput number there, which is, like I said, just the total amount of energy that is being put through and taken out of the battery over the course of its lifespan. You're getting just a lot more power through the battery because it's more durable, it lasts longer, it is relatively low maintenance. So comparatively to other types of lithium ion chemistry, it's not really even close. Now, the reason why a lot of people get turned off to LFPs initially is the cost, right? The upfront cost for 10 kilowatt hours, you can see right there, it's more expensive than the other chemistries on the market. But as soon as you combine that upfront cost with how long the battery is going to be in operation, and look at just the cost per kilowatt hour, the energy throughput of that battery, you're saving money in the long term. If you can keep this battery in operation and keep it running compared to other types of chemistries, you're going to save money over the long term. So safety, durability, the long duration of the ability of the battery is the reason why people are choosing LFPs over other types of chemistries. It's just that initial upfront cost that needs to be, I guess, massaged or understood a little better by the consumer, the fact that if you can keep them in operation, you're going to save money in the long term. Now, if you're familiar with Fortress, you're familiar with our two residential products that we offer, our 18.5 kilowatt hour eVault Max and our 5.4 kilowatt hour eFlex battery. So both of these batteries are scalable. On the eVault Max side, you can scale up to 370 kilowatt hours, which is dabbling in the light commercial space. On the eFlex side, those go up to 80 kilowatt hours, and we can mount those in all sorts of different ways. You can see on the bottom of my presentation here, they can be wall mounted. They can just mount on the floor. You can there's all sorts of different ways I've seen people orient these batteries, and it's really, really impressive what people are capable of. Just wanted to speak on our residential products, because what we're going to be talking about on the C&I side, the commercial industrial side, is not all that different fundamentally technology-wise, right? The major difference is scale. So one of these eSpire 233s, the C&I battery we're going to be talking about, is roughly equal to about 13 of our larger residential models, the eVault Max. So that's the one big difference, is the battery capacity. The second main difference would just be power output, right? On the residential side, you're using single phase or split phase power and 12K inverters, depending on how much power demand you need. On this commercial side, we're looking at truly 3-phase power, 480 volt AC power. So those are the two main differences. Both of them have to do with scale, right? So let's talk a little bit about what we're actually seeing in the C&I market and why we're even selling this thing in the first place, right? As it stands currently, the market for commercial battery power, there's not a ton of solutions for projects right above 200 kilowatt hours, all the way up to, say, 5 megawatt hours of storage. That space right above residential and right below C&I utility. There's not a lot of solutions on the market, but the number of applications is varied, and it's high. There's high demand for these solutions. You see agricultural facilities that are trying to attack demand charges, where they're getting charged $15, $20 per kilowatt, where they otherwise would be charged less than $5. Community solar, where you're talking resiliency and being able to feed power back into the grid. Grocery stores, again, for resiliency, where they can put a dollar amount to how much a power outage costs them. And schools, obviously, where you want to, when the kids are in school, you got to keep the lights on, if not for a couple hours. These are home runs for this size of system, but there's just not a lot of options on the market. Why is that? We feel, and what the feedback we've gotten is, utility size systems, they can do it. Those companies can come down into that space. However, they can be a little bit overkill for jobs that are less than 4 megawatt hours. The residential size systems, for example, the eVault Max, there are some circumstances where you do want to scale up those single phase or split phase systems. But if you had to do it for a true 480 volt 3-phase solution, it can get very complicated in terms of balancing the phases in the inverters. Just the copper cost alone, wiring up that many inverters and batteries, it's probably just not going to make a ton of sense. The other reason why utility scale guys don't necessarily want to go into this smaller project space is because they don't really want to waste their time, their resources on something that they could do a 10 megawatt hour job, spend relatively the same amount of time, and make a lot more money. So I've heard feedback that people are just get blown off by those larger companies that have a solution that's capable, but it's not worth their time. The residential scale guys, they can make something work, but it'll be very complicated, and it just doesn't make financial sense at the end of the day. So that's really what we're seeing, right? That's the opportunity. Fill that gap between the utility scale backup, something that's medium size, that's modular, think Lego building blocks, and that is as plug and play as we could possibly make it. Just plopping the battery down on the pad, hook up a couple connections, test that power can be delivered, and you're good to go. So what is this the system that we're actually selling? Well, it's called the eSpire 233 for 233 kilowatt hours. On the left-hand side there, you can see the three components of the system. In the middle is the battery cabinet. On the far left-hand side would be a control cabinet, which controls the system BMS and some components within the battery cabinet. And on the far right-hand side there, you can see the 125 kilowatt inverter that it's paired with for 480 volt power delivery. Just want a brief note about the LFP technology that we use in these batteries. Of the 3 tiers of LFP chemistry being EV grade, energy storage grade, and telecom grade LFP, our system does use that EV grade tier 1 quality lithium iron phosphate chemistry. The reason why people choose that is because, like I said, it's the highest level of safety, highest level of thermal stability, and the highest level of reliability for those batteries. So as far as scaling, you can see, like I said, the 125 kilowatt inverter paired with the 233 kilowatt hour battery cabinet. These are the basic building blocks of the system, right? So the battery cabinets themselves, we can scale that up from 233 kilowatt hours all the way to 3.5 megawatt hours of capacity. And on the inverter side, we start at 125 kilowatts of deliverable power and scale that all the way up to 625 kilowatts of deliverable power in one system. So just a couple things to mention here, the advantages of this system. The integrated multi-level BMS, just like on a residential side, the battery management system is monitoring the system, it's optimizing, it's balancing, it's taking a look at temperature, current, voltage, making not only within the individual cells and modules of the battery, but the battery cabinets individually, integrating that information and making sure that all the batteries operate in simpatico. As I mentioned before, the whole goal of this is to make it as turnkey of a solution as we possibly can, right? Just for quicker installs, very little installation requirements, which is going to allow for a lot more flexibility of install. So this thing is outdoor rated. It's meant to go outdoors. You can see the picture on the right here. That's it looks like a configuration of 6 batteries and 2 inverters. One really cool thing about this, it is liquid cooled, similar to a gaming PC or a car radiator. It's fully integrated. You don't need to hook up any water lines or anything like that. But that liquid cooling system is helping to really extend that battery lifespan by improving that battery thermal performance. We found that versus conventional HVAC fan cooled batteries, these batteries are, in terms of thermal performance, operate 3 times better than those HVAC batteries. When it comes to batteries, keeping them cool is ultimately what's going to keep them in operation longer. And as I mentioned, keeping them in operation longer allows you to attack your return on investment, the bottom line, directly. One thing that I've come to learn about Fortress in my 8 months that I've been here is that people really love our engineering team, our quick response to our technical support team. So if you ever have, in troubleshooting this or setting up for the first time, we have a Philadelphia-based team that you pick up the phone, you can call and talk to an engineer in person to help you understand exactly what you are working with. And that speaks also to our lab in the back, where if you have an issue in the field that you just can't seem to understand, you give us a call. We can go back to our lab in the back, try and replicate the actual scenario, call you back and say, hey, this is what we tried, you try this. So that is just one thing that people love about Fortress, our local US-based technical support team. Just the last thing to note here is this system does come standard with a 5-year warranty. That's the battery, the inverter, and the control cabinet. That is extendable for an additional 5 years for the battery only, so a 10-year warranty. That is a performance warranty, so we would say your day 1 life is 100%. By year 2, and these are just rough numbers, year 2 you'll have 95%, and year 5 you'll have X%. So there's a degradation curve that follows with that 10-year performance warranty. So really, whether you're looking for peak shaving for demand charge management, load shifting for time of use savings, just standalone operation in off-grid power mode or off-grid mode for power backup, or if you're just looking to store excess solar energy, we think the eSpire 233 is a great way for you to help secure your energy. So just getting into the system scope, what are you actually getting when you purchase one of these systems? On the left-hand side there, you can see items number 1 through 3. Under item number 1, that would all be self-contained within the battery cabinet. So you have the outdoor rated cabinet. I'll talk about, you see the 699 kilowatt hour battery capacity. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The the battery modules. There are 5 battery modules contained within the battery cabinet. The battery management system for the cabinet levels also self-contains, as I mentioned. That's taking a look at voltage, current, temperature, and it's also controlling the liquid cooling system to make sure that the battery is staying cool. The liquid cooling system itself, like I mentioned, fully integrated. You don't really need to hook up any sort of wiring or liquid installation there, and it's just a 50% ethylene glycol coolant. It does have built-in fire protection, so we are UL 9540A certified for fire suppression. That is all controlled by the BMS and the system BMS, which is located in the control cabinet. And the way that works is there's a temperature sensor, there's a smoke sensor, and if one of those sensors is tripped, the system will shut off power so you can diagnose the issue. If both of those sensors are tripped, the smoke and the temperature, there is a potassium salt solution that releases from the top of the cabinet to try and ward off any sort of thermal runaway that could potentially occur. The second piece there in the system scope is the control cabinet. That, like I said, houses the system BMS, so it's taking a look at every individual cabinet and making sure that there's not too much stress on one cabinet versus another, and can distribute the load evenly between those cabinets. That has an uninterruptible power supply as well, so it's capable of black start. If you completely lose power, if the grid goes out, a grid tied system, it will let our system know that, hey, it's your turn to form the grid. The UPS kicks on, and there's no way for the battery system to be out of power in an outage situation. And the last piece there is the Delta brand 125 kilowatt PCS that's also sold with the unit. As I mentioned, that's 480 volt output. That is the Delta output. So any system that's going to be requiring backup, it needs to work in an outage situation, is also going to require an isolation transformer to get from 3-phase 3-wire to 3-phase 4-wire. So just something to keep in mind. And again, that we can expand those cabinets. We can put 5 of those together in series to get up to 625 kilowatts of deliverable power. I just want to talk briefly about our limitations on the side of how many batteries we can connect to an individual inverter. So on the left-hand side here, you can see what would be called really the smallest system size that we offer, which is one singular 125 kilowatt PCS, one 233 kilowatt hour battery cabinet, one control cabinet, and you can see there the Guardian device, which also sits inside the control cabinet, which is our gateway that feeds data to the cloud, so you can remotely access this information and make changes remotely. On the right-hand side, you can see what represents a maxed out configuration for our batteries. We can put up to 3 batteries to 1 inverter. So when I said earlier, we can scale the batteries up to 3.5 megawatt hours. That would be 3 cabinets connected to 1 inverter and 5 of those inverters. So it would be 15 battery cabinets and 5 inverters. You can see the isolation transformer up at the top. Like I said, that will be required to go from the Delta output to the Y configuration, which is pretty standard. Let's talk a little bit about the battery module. Like I said, the module itself, these are prismatic battery cells. There are 52 cells in series within each one of these modules, and then there's 5 battery modules that you can see on the right-hand side here. The BMS, like I said, is taking a look at all of those individual modules and making sure that they're working together to evenly distribute the power delivery to the inverter. You can see just some things I do want to mention here. The UL certifications, we are UL 1973, UL 9540A, and just about to pass UL 9540 as the compatibility test with the inverter and the battery cabinet. So I will mention just briefly, this configuration is the only thing that we're UL certified for. If you'd like to do additional battery cabinets to 1 inverter, we can do that. It would just require a DC combiner box and the knowledge that you won't have a UL certified system. I'll just briefly want to talk about the system and the enclosure, especially for you all in Canada, because as we know, it gets pretty cold in the winter up north. So just some things to consider here. Our ambient working temperature is -25°C, so -13 degrees Fahrenheit. However, if it's going to be experiencing those temperatures for extended periods of time, you're going to want to look to include some type of outdoor, some type of outdoor enclosure to keep the wind off the battery, to keep it above that 25°C temperature for most of its lifespan. Some other things to mention here: it is relatively heavy system, so you can see it's 2,500 kegs for the battery, and another 300 or so for the inverter. So you do want to make sure that you have proper grading for the pads that these are going to go on. And you will most likely, in fact, definitely require a forklift to offload these when they get to site. Finally, just to mention, these can be packed pretty close together. I think it's something like 100 millimeters in certain directions that these cabinets can be oriented. However, there are some clearances that need to be observed when you're putting these systems in. All that being said, this is supposed to be, like I said, as turnkey as possible, where you can just put these things down, and they should be able to provide maintenance to them relatively easily. Just quick on the 125 kilowatt Delta inverter. This piece of equipment is ubiquitous in the industry, in the battery and the energy storage industry. People say that it's a reliable piece of technology. One piece of feedback that I have heard is that Delta as a brand, as a company, can be tough to get quick information out of, which is part of why we've worked closely with Delta to try and put all of that equipment under the Fortress Power umbrella, so that if you do have issues with the inverter, or you do have questions about the inverter, you don't need to go to Delta. There's no back and forth. You would come through Fortress, and we can help you understand anything you're trying to work through. But yeah, mentioned most of what's you can see on the screen here. It is black start capable. This is an AC coupled system only, but it can work in both grid tied and fully off grid situations. And like I mentioned, everything is NEMA 3R, IP54. It's rated for outdoor applications, but depending on where you are up north, you may want to consider some type of roof or enclosure to keep these things out of the harsher elements. Just to give you an idea what the control cabinet specs are, again, not too much to this, but this is a lot of the brains of the system. This has all of the UPS, the system BMS, the fire suppression control. All of that is located within the control cabinet, and you're really only going to need one of these per system size. So yeah, that's the main thing on the control cabinet here. So yeah, as I said, if you're looking for something an energy storage system to just to attack those demand charges, or to just store excess solar, if you can put a dollar amount to how much money it costs you or your customer every time you do have an outage, the system is really a slam dunk. It's a home run. It's something that we feel is going to be a nice niche product for the market, right above that residential and right below the commercial or an industrial utility space. So with that said, I'd like to open the floor to any questions that you all have. I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat, so hopefully someone from BayWa can help me if they have received any questions.
Sure, there were a couple questions. First one: where are Fortress batteries manufactured?
They are manufactured in China. We do have it's a parallel team. So we have a team in China that handles some engineering, manufacturing, a little bit of quality control. And then in the United States, it's sales, logistics, quality control, also tech support and engineering. So they are manufactured in China, and I believe it's something like 80% of the world's LFP batteries are made in China. So take that for what it's worth, but we typically we do get a lot of questions about Buy America Act and how we're able to comply with this. It does depend on the actual site, what they're willing to accept in terms of an exemption. But typically for batteries, because you can't, it's tough to find these outside of these non-NATO countries. You can either file for an exemption, or if it's a balance of system, we can find a way to say, you know, this was substantially transformed in the United States.
Okay. There's another question. What is the BTU heat output of the batteries? And then in brackets saying for calculating potential enclosure insulation requirements.
That's a great question. I think I'd have to get back to you on that one. Whoever did ask that question, my info is on the screen here. I know that info is somewhere in our logs, our data sheets, but I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, no worries. The next question, I'm just going to pop this out because it's really difficult to read otherwise. Is there fire suppression for the residential applications?
On our residential side, I don't believe we have built-in fire suppression. It would really just be the battery management system shutting off the equipment in case of any sort of over temp or over voltage.
Okay. Sounds good. Are there any other questions from the chat or from any of the audience, I should say? Okay. This one says possibly similar to heat. What about noise? So I imagine that's something to do with the enclosure.
Yeah, to be frank, I haven't seen any sort of any noise data. I don't think these systems make a whole lot of noise, but let me look into that and get back to you. As far as I know, there are no decibel requirements, or just in terms of how many decibels the system puts off at different distances. But I can look into that.
Sure. All right. I'll give it another minute, maybe another one or two pops up here. Oh, here we go. One of your early slides, you mentioned something about the configuration of the battery. Could you go over that?
The configuration of the battery itself. Let's see. So this may be the slide that they're referring to. I could go through this a little bit. So you can see if this isn't what your question is about, please chime in so I'm not just talking for no reason. But these are the 5 modules of the battery system. You can see up at the top, right around here, that is the smoke and temperature sensor and the fire suppression system. You have the control cabinet on the bottom left-hand side. So that's all these orange and black cables are the high voltage cables. They connect into that control box, which houses the system, or I should say the cabinet BMS. So it's taking a look at all the cells in each of those individual modules, taking all that data here. And there's also a comms connection to this control box that sends it back to the main control cabinet that's integrating all that information. On the top left, you can see that's actually the liquid cooling system. On the very top left, you see the 2 ethylene glycol lines. The cable harness works all the way around the top and then gets fed into each of those individual battery modules for the thermal system. So you can see there's really only 3 connections for this thing at the bottom, right? It's the 2 high voltage cables, orange and black, and the comms connection cable that runs to the control cabinet. There's a grounding wire, but that's when I say turnkey, that's you shouldn't have to, as a consumer or even an installer, deal with much of anything in here. This is going to come fully set up to site.
Okay. Kyle, one of the question about this one was about configuration, said something to do with a word starting with prim, like prime, I guess, maybe prime power, PRIM. Prime. Oh, this must be the one, the prismatic battery cell. I think that's the one.
Yes, maybe yes. So that just goes to the different, different types of battery cells that are on the market. You have pouch cells, you have cylindrical cells. This is a prismatic battery cells. Everyone is starting to gravitate towards prismatic cells because they're the most thermally optimized. They're the most reliable. They don't experience the thermal runaway in the way that pouch cells or other cylindrical cells do experience it. So we've gone. It's the same prismatic cell that we use on our residential side. There's a reason why we've gone kind of gung ho in this prismatic LFP battery cell.
Sounds good. There's another question. How do you work with local engineering design teams? So I'm not sure if that's maybe to do with just knowledge of the local market, or how do we get in touch with your tech support, I suppose?
Yeah, so
design team.
So in terms of engineering and design, if you're looking at a potential project, I'm the one that you're going to be interfacing with directly. So the way that I go about it is I have a questionnaire that I send your way. You fill out the questionnaire, and that helps me understand. It really saves time more than anything, so we don't have to go back and forth. You say, what's the application? What size of battery do you think you need? Blah, 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 all that. You send that questionnaire back to me. We sit down for a 30-minute meeting where we essentially go through that questionnaire, and I ask questions. If you have a line diagram, any sort of preliminary line diagram, so we can understand, where this battery system is going to be fitting in. If you have 15-minute interval data that we can review to understand the demands on the power system and how long those demands are going to be required, we'll talk through all that, and then from there I can provide a tailor-made quote that includes the battery, the inverter, and depending on the application, we have a separate package of equipment that we call a backup package. Now, that package of equipment includes things like Schweitzer relays, grid detection devices, some transformers, so just some little bits and pieces that you will need to integrate. You will need to acquire to integrate into your system, but we're selling it as a single package. So that is something that is separate from the battery, and the inverter is going to be totally dependent on your application. Also included in that package, if needed, is a microgrid controller and EMS control. So when I say turnkey, that's exactly what I mean. Trying to give you all the different pieces that you will ultimately need to create a microgrid system, but you get it all in one package. You get it from Fortress Power, and there's one line of communication as opposed to 5, 6 different companies that you're trying to get information out of.
Nice. There's a couple other questions here too. I noticed somebody has their hand raised as well, but I'm not exactly sure how to. I'll figure out how to unmute them, maybe to have them ask. But the other question said, do you make any other inverters for the smaller batteries besides the 125 kilowatt?
So on our residential side, we are inverter agnostic. We don't manufacture inverters on the residential side or the commercial side. We use the 125 Delta PCS. But on the residential side, any 48 volt inverter on the market, if you go to our website, there are startup guides for every inverter that we're compatible with. That's when I talk about our test lab. That's the coolest thing I think about our facility is you go back into the lab and there's a Schneider, there's an SMA, there's an Outback, there's a Solarc, and we can hook any of our batteries up to any of the inverters to understand how they're going to interact. So residential side, inverter agnostic. Commercial side, the Delta 125 PCS is the only one we're offering.
Okay. Delta 125. I'm just writing that down so I can send it off. So that's great.
Sure.
Let me see here. Oh, it looks like, okay, so the gentleman who had their hand raised is now, he put the question in the chat. There's another person also that said, I joined a bit late. Was anything mentioned about online monitoring?
I didn't get too much into online monitoring other than this system is fully capable of remote monitoring via that Guardian gateway. So let me bring up this picture again. Yeah, this system is meant to be able to be monitored from remote locations. All of the data about how the batteries are operating, how much power is being delivered to and from the system is all getting fed through the control cabinet into the Guardian gateway device and then into the cloud. So you'll have it's an online dashboard essentially that you would log into that on any browser that you can then check the status of your batteries, check the status of the inverters, see a lot of granular information about the system and make decisions based off of that.
Excellent. Okay, so the other question, can battery operate as site prime, and what is the annual cycle allowance for the 5 and 10-year performance warranties? Does that make sense to you? I think prime power being on site, asking about that.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, this system is meant to form the grid for whatever microgrid system or application that you're looking at. Can you repeat the second part of that question?
Yeah, what is the annual cycle allowance for the 5 and 10-year performance warranties?
Right. So we are, in terms of cycles, the warranty for the system is 6,000 cycles at 90% depth of discharge. So it's really going to depend on, again, the application. It stinks that is the answer, but it does depend. If you're going to be, we recommend that the system does, trickle charge and discharge throughout the day, if especially connected to the grid. But 6,000 cycles at 90% depth of discharge is what the batteries are spec for lifetime wise.
Okay. There's more. I'm typing these out as we go.
Sure.
That's great. Can your battery then be hooked up to any other inverter? And I think you already answered that. So the commercial, no, you can just only do the Delta 125, but for the residential, it's inverter agnostic.
Correct. And the whole reasoning behind that is because there was a lot of integration work that we've worked closely with Delta on. We feel that it's best to keep those pieces of equipment operating together. Maybe in the future we'll look to integrate more inverters, but this system is relatively new. It was launched in February. We've got 2 or 3 installs now finishing up before the end of the year. But for now, the Delta 125 PCS is the only PCS that we will be working through.
Okay, cool. Somebody had a follow-up question to the inverters as well, and that was, do you work with SolarEdge Energy Hub inverters? And that's probably on the residential side, I suspect.
Yes, so I would have to check specifically on that model of inverter. I'm not sure off the top of my head. On the C&I side, what we specify in terms of what at least solar inverters can talk with the system. If it has Modbus TCP communication protocol, we can integrate to it. Now, a lot of that has to do with the microgrid controller, how it's talking back and forth between the solar inverters. But Modbus TCP, if it has that communication protocol, some type of sun spec, we can integrate with that.
Okay. Sounds great. All right, I think I've gotten to all of the questions. Unless anybody else has any more that are coming. I don't think they are. I think that's probably it. So I guess I should just thank you for joining us today. And I'm just trying to take a little bit of time while everybody, if you do have another question, feel free to write it so I can see it in there. But yeah, but otherwise, thanks a lot for joining us here today, Kyle. We really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing what we could do and what our customers can do with some projects with these particular batteries in there. We've had a lot of success with the Fortress brand on the residential side, the smaller scale. So I hope to see the same success on the commercial side. So for everybody else, again, just want to reiterate, so the presentation has been recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel shortly, as well as sent out in our next newsletter. So you'll look for that. You can always reach out to your sales reps with any additional questions that might arise after the presentation today. So feel free to reach out to our team, and we will be happy to get you in touch with the folks at Fortress. And just your questions help us get better as well, right? So anytime we can learn from something that you might be asking, we're happy to do that. So it's always, we ask that you go through us and try to educate us a little bit better as well. All right, so I guess the other thing, the next two bullet points don't really apply. We don't really have this item set up on our web store right now. We always try to put it in a little bit of a plug for our web store. This is a commercial product. I don't think we've really had an opportunity to bring one on. So if you need specs, you want details, feel free to reach out to your salesperson. We don't have this stuff on the web store quite yet, but we'd be happy to put it there, and we'd be happy to get all this information off to you. If you reach out to us. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. We really appreciate the support, and we appreciate your participation in this. And thank you, Kyle, as well, especially.
Thanks, Raul. Thank you, Baywa. Again, thanks everyone for joining.
That's great. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.